Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Election Updates and Tips from Election Officials and Nonprofit Leaders webinar. My name is Karina. I'm the Program Manager at the California Association of Nonprofits. Again, I want to welcome you all. We will be starting officially in about one more minute just to let folks sort of jump on. But in the meantime, feel free to use the chat box. We want to know who is joining us. So type in your name, your organization, and where you're joining us from. For example, I am in the Bay Area, so joining you from close to the SF airport. And we'll start giving you a shout out. And like I said, we'll be starting in a few seconds. It is already 11:01. And we'll be joining you shortly. All right, Kathleen Lee from Monterey Bay, welcome. Folks from Oakland, Capitola, whoa, it's moving really fast. And just know that we have over 500 registrants for this webinar. So we anticipate having a lot of folks, typing into the chat box and a lot of communication with you all. All right, I see folks from LA, from San Diego, Pat from San Diego, hi, Irvine from San Francisco. Great diversity from the whole state, from what I can tell. All right, so it is 11:02, so I want to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to the Election Updates and Tips from Election Officials and Nonprofit Leaders webinar. My name is Karina Paredes. I'm the Program Manager at the California Association of Nonprofits, Cal Nonprofits for short. I'm really excited for the panelists that we were able to join together to bring to you today. And thank you for joining us. We do have, in case you have any audio issues and can't hear me right now, I would encourage you to call in. So the number is up on your screen right now, and we'll be sure to put it in the chat box as well. And before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping issues to touch on. Next slide. All right, so as I mentioned, we have over 500 registrants today, and we want to hear from you, definitely. So if you have any questions for our speakers, please type them into the Q&A box. Having them in the Q&A box helps us keep track of them. And the chat box for any technical issues, if you can't hear. If you see someone that you know, give them a shout out in the chat box. And also know that we are recording this webinar. So don't try to hurry up and try to jot everything down. We will be following up with the recording and a link to the slides as well, and any additional resources mentioned during this webinar. So know that that's coming to you. All right, next slide. And like I said, I'm really excited about today's panelist discussion. But I first want to introduce some of my colleagues at Cal Nonprofits who will be sort of setting the landscape for this overall, agenda. First is our CEO, Jan Masaoka. She will be covering very, very briefly why nonprofits should be involved in elections, right? And also our public policy director, Lucy Salcido Carter. She's also our lead moderator on this webinar, and she'll be covering really quickly the legal do's and don'ts of nonprofits being involved in elections. All right, take it away, Lucy.
Hi, yes, I'm actually going to turn it to Jan. Jan, you're on.
Hi. I think everybody who's on this session today knows that it's important to vote, right? So, but I just want to remind us, it really matters who's in office, and it really matters what ballot propositions pass and which ones fail. And every single one of us every day is affected by those two things. So because the outcome of elections matters, it means that voting matters. It matters to communities, but it also matters to nonprofits, not just on behalf of our communities, but for the kind of funding and the kind of regulatory support or opposition that we're going to experience. And just a couple of things that might get overlooked. We often think about mobilizing our constituents to vote, but just a word about mobilizing our own staff and volunteers. 1 in every 14 California jobs is at a nonprofit. More than 1 million people work at nonprofit organizations, and almost 5 million people volunteer at nonprofit organizations. So another way of thinking about about that is instead of thinking about all those people, think about all those voters. Okay. And the fact is that if everybody who worked or volunteered in child welfare services voted, we'd have better child welfare funding. It's that simple. If everybody who worked or volunteered in the environment voted, we'd have better environmental policies. It is that simple. So I'm hoping that that we will all kind of recommit to the importance of starting with our staff and volunteers, going on to our constituents, because the people that are in those three groups, they represent the real heart of California, and the people whose interests are the ones that we have to make sure that their interests are what guide our voting, and as a result, the election outcomes. So I'm so happy to see so many people here. As Karina mentioned, we have more than 500 people registered for today. And we have, only like 100 speakers, okay? So we're gonna zip, it's gonna be like speed dating, okay? Speed speaking, all right? So go ahead and Zoom everybody through this, Lucy. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jan and Karina. So hi, yes, I'm Lucy. I just want to quickly let you know what you've got in store for you. It's really going to be an exciting webinar. We are going to be hearing in a couple of minutes from the Secretary of State. We also have an awesome panelist that will include a registrar from one of the California counties and some nonprofit leaders. So we're really looking forward to that. But before we get started with that agenda, I feel that we really need to go over some very basic do's and don'ts, nonprofit election do's and don'ts. So let's just take a quick look at those. And again, this is going to be very brief, the 2-minute version, but we are going to be doing a longer version in a webinar on August 27th. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But let's start with what nonprofits cannot do related to voting. So we cannot endorse or oppose a specific candidate. We cannot engage in partisan voter registration. So like registering a voter just for one party. We can't put up signs about a particular candidate. We can't give money and resources to a particular candidate. So again, we really have to watch about being partisan. Now here's what we can do. Everything else. We can engage in voter registration, and we've got the website listed right there on the slide for registering to vote. So that includes also giving action steps to people who are not eligible to vote, and making sure that everyone is registered at their current address, which will be particularly important this year. It also includes voter education, so you can publish and share nonpartisan analyses, and you can take a stand on ballot measures. We can also mobilize voters and remind them to vote. So those are just some quick do's and don'ts. Again, I wanted to let you know that we will be having a webinar on August 27th with a lot more details of the legal do's and don'ts of how to engage in the election as a nonprofit. So I hope that you will register for that event, and we'll spend a whole hour digging into this in more detail. But for now, what I would really like to do is welcome our Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, to the webinar, and just want to say a couple of words before we turn it over to him. So he was elected as Secretary of State in 2014 and re-elected in 2018. Prior to his role as Secretary of State, he served as a state senator, and before that on the Los Angeles City Council. As Secretary of State, he has led statewide efforts to expand voter registration, to increase ballot accessibility, and to modernize election administration. And an interesting tidbit about the secretary is that he graduated from MIT with a degree in engineering. And when he was asked, or has been asked, how he moved from engineering to public service, one of the things that he says is that they are similar in that the goals of both is to solve problems. So with that, we've got some unique conditions happening now this year around elections. So we've got some unique challenges to solve. So I would like to turn it over to the Secretary to talk about election changes and how nonprofits can support fair elections this year. Secretary.
Great. Well, thank you, Lucy. Appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you virtually under the circumstances. But as you mentioned, it is a key moment in time as it pertains to civic engagement. You know, we knew 2020 was going to be a big year when it first started, between a presidential election and I know we're keeping it strictly nonpartisan here, but also because of the census, which is critically important. And I know y'all have been involved with getting the word out on the census. So with the deadline coming up even sooner than we needed, want to make one more pitch to continue to amplify that message through your networks. But as you were introducing me, I put a web address in the chat box, vote.ca.gov. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that we all need to anticipate as the November general election is 83 days away. Yes, 83 days. I'm counting, which means that in 54 days, you can expect ballots in your mailbox. So what I wanted to do is cover at a very high level some of the key changes that people should expect for this November's election to be able to participate and participate safely, right? We're making some adjustments and accommodations so that people in California do not have to choose between exercising their right to vote and protecting their health and that of their loved ones. And then it'll make sense as I explain what we're doing differently when I say we're going to ask for your help. So I'll get to that in a minute. And whatever I don't cover, I'm sure Ryan from Placer County will give you that hands-on, on-the-ground administrative perspective as well. But for starters, look, vote by mail, I know is hugely popular in California and has been for a long time. The last decade alone, we've gone from 50% of ballots being done by mail to 60%. In our March primary, it was more than 70% of the ballots cast were by mail. And so as we've huddled with a lot of stakeholders, including maybe some of the people on this Zoom, about how to best approach the November election during the COVID-19 pandemic, we immediately knew that expanding vote by mail was going to be key. There's no more convenient, more safer way than to vote from the comfort and safety of your own home. And so people should anticipate that ballot about a month before the election. But we know California is a large and diverse state, and there's a lot of voters who will need an in-person opportunity to vote. And they have that right, in my opinion. So we were working in partnership with all 58 counties to provide as many safe opportunities to vote in person, both on and before election day, right? So be aware that most counties will be offering multiple days of in-person voting for folks who need it. For most counties, it's going to be 4 days of voting, 3 days of early voting, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then of course, Tuesday, November 3rd as well. Some counties may go above and beyond and offer additional days, but voters should be aware that that's their option if they need it. Our first choice is vote by mail, but our general strategy is as many people as we can encourage to vote early, whether it's by mail or safely in person, should translate into shorter lines, smaller crowds, and a safer experience on Tuesday, November 3rd for those who need to go to the polls. Safe experience, not just for voters, I should tell you, but for poll workers as well. So as you can anticipate, just, we can't go to the grocery store the same way anymore. We're not going to be able to vote the same way anymore. If you choose to vote in person, bring your masks. We're going to have masks and hand sanitizer, all the PPE necessary for poll workers, signage for physical distancing, right? So envision no more booths all side by side when we vote that have to be spaced apart for obvious public health reasons, those sorts of things. So we want to continue to work in partnership to get the word out from a voter education standpoint. We're working hard to provide these multiple safe opportunities to vote, but they're not as helpful if voters aren't aware of them. And so again, vote.ca.gov is the centralized website for information on verifying your voter registration status, making sure that the address on file is your most current one, so we know where to send you your ballot. For people who need to register to vote for the first time or update their registration, they can choose the register to vote function at vote.ca.gov or go directly to registertovote.ca.gov. And we'll also invite you to take advantage of one of our new tools. You mentioned that the poll worker recruitment, and I'll get to that in a second, but another tool for voters is you can now subscribe to get either text message alerts, email alerts, or automated phone calls on the status of your ballot as it's working its way through the post office. Kind of like your UPS package when you shop online. So you'll have the alert when the ballot's coming to you, when it's on the way back to the county. And Lucy, imagine getting an alert that your ballot was received by the county and counted, right? I think it's great for transparency, great for accountability, right? Because we'll be able to identify delays or bottlenecks in the Postal Service, and great for peace of mind for our voters. And I think that tool in particular is critical, as there are some folks out there trying to attack the legitimacy of vote by mail. But here's where we need your help. Vote by mail is the first choice, in my opinion, but for voters who need that in-person experience, we want to provide that for them. The extent to which we can provide those safe in-person opportunities depends on two things. And every single county in California has told me that they need help to different extents on the following. First of all, identifying new voting locations, right? There's not going to be any more voting in a neighbor's garage, or if your polling place has been at a retirement home in the past, for obvious reasons, those don't make sense anymore. So we're looking for new, safer locations for voting. If you have any ideas, or if your organization has facilities that would lend themselves to being a polling location, please let us know. We'll connect you with your county registrar of voter to check out that location and see if it fits the bill. Accessibility, parking, all the considerations. You can email us directly, by the way, at democracyatwork, all one word, democracyatwork @sos.ca.gov. And even if we succeed in getting all the locations we could hope for, they are not as helpful if we don't have the volunteers to work at the polls. And for those of us who have voted in the past, we know that a good number of poll workers historically have been senior citizens and retirees. They too are not going to be as available this November because they're most advised to stay at home because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So folks, this is breaking news. You are my first Zoom, you are my first presentation since we launched a new tool at the Secretary of State's website. Robbie, go ahead and add the link to the chat box for folks who are interested and willing to serve as poll workers, or if you want to help us promote the opportunity and the need to your networks, go to pollworker.sos.ca.gov, or again, it'll be one of the many options at vote.ca.gov, because we need folks to sign up. Folks who are healthy and not just taking anything for granted. Plenty of training is involved, so we know that you're ready, and we'll don you with all the PPE necessary to keep you and voters safe, with all the public health protocols being implemented at all polling locations. And so that's sort of the big pitch. Happy to answer some questions if there's more specifics or details that folks are wondering about. But the November 3rd election is happening. I'm referring to it less and less as election day, because frankly, it is simply the last day to vote. We want people to vote early if they can, by mail or safely in person, so we can minimize the lines and keep the experience as safe as possible on Tuesday, November 3rd. So thank you again for all you do on the variety of issues that you advocate for. Fully respect the role of nonprofit organizations, keeping it nonpartisan, keeping it within the boundaries of the law. But I think you all agree, just the fact that we're having this conversation, that there's a lot that you can do to support our small d democracy.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Padilla. We do have a few questions for you. In fact, we had quite a few come in before the webinar, and we've got quite a few coming in now. Around a lot of questions around access for particular populations, and then also some questions around how to protect nonprofits should they serve as a polling location. So maybe just starting with some of the accessibility questions. Can people who are experiencing homelessness register using an address like a soup kitchen address or some other kind of shelter address? What's the best way for them to register and get a ballot, a vote by mail ballot?
Right. No, great question. And so I think the situation is even better than people can imagine. individuals experiencing homelessness, just as they are critical to be counted in the census, it's critical that they maintain their voting rights as well. So when somebody's registering to vote, and we have ample opportunity, right? You can do the paper form, you can do it online, you can do it at DMV, or you can participate in same-day registration at any voting location in the state of California. So when you register, there's opportunities for 2 different addresses to be listed. One is where you're registered. What do you consider your residence? If you have a traditional address, fine. If you don't, that's okay. You know, intersections, cross streets is acceptable for purposes of voter registration, or even just a general description of where you tend to stay or live. That's separate and apart from your mailing address, right? A lot of people are registered in a location and receive their ballot in a different address. So whether it is a food pantry, whether it is a shelter, or simply a friend's address, all of those are acceptable for a mailing address for individuals experiencing homelessness.
Great, thank you. And then just a couple of other access questions, and I know Karina's got some questions up her sleeve too. She'll jump in. So what about folks with disabilities who want to vote in person? Are there particular strategies that you're implementing to make sure that that happens, given that we've got some extra conditions to handle this year?
Look, access concerns are paramount, right? We just celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, you know, huge landmark legislation for our nation. And so as we plan and administer elections, we keep accessibility in mind at all facets, whether it's registration. You know, our website itself is fully accessible. Voter registration forms in Braille, those sorts of things have been in place in California for a long time. And the act of voting itself, right? We have multiple options, each of which have to be fully accessible for voters who choose them. If it's in person, our facilities have to be accessible. I mentioned access to public transportation, all those sorts of things. And it's not just the venue itself, it's the voting systems, right? The equipment that you can vote on. We have fully accessible voting systems in the state of California. But we're encouraging vote by mail, and vote by mail has been popular on its own. And so California is one of the national pioneers in remote accessible vote by mail systems. So a voter that has that preference simply needs to communicate to their county registrar of voter, so we ensure they get their ballot and the equipment necessary for them to continue to vote privately and independently, because that's hugely important. But you know, a lot of people prefer to go to the polls if they need accessibility assistance, language assistance, maybe a replacement ballot, whatever the reason is, all the more reason why we need to maintain those in-person options.
Wonderful, thank you. Karina, I know you've got some questions for the Secretary.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, we got quite a bit of questions, some of them that were sent in prior to the webinar, but in regards to concerns to fraud, we know that we're really, you know, it's very important to vote by mail, especially with election. But in general, what are secretaries of state across the country doing to counter the charges of, you know, fraud with vote by mail, and what can nonprofits also do to try to help that, you know, education?
Great question, and I appreciate it, because again, we need your help. Way too much of my time is consumed with having to correct the record. And I'm not going to name names, but there's forces out there trying to undermine confidence in vote by mail and our elections more broadly through these false accusations of massive voter fraud. So basically, arm yourself with the truth. You know, voter fraud is exceedingly rare across the country, including in vote by mail. Vote by mail is nothing new in California. We've been doing it for decades. It's proven to be convenient for voters, secure, and successful in blue states, and red states, and purple states. And so, you know, I'll give you a couple of examples of some of the safety measures that we have in place to protect the integrity of vote by mail. You know, first of all, there's this conspiracy theory out there that, oh, other countries are going to be printing ballots and flooding elections offices. Not true. You know, it's not quite like the security of our currency, but when it comes to ballots, you know, we have to integrate things like, you know, watermarks and paper types and all those sorts of things, so we can differentiate between legitimate ballots and not. You know, when you vote by mail, you'll get instructions, reminders to sign the back of the envelope when you return it, for example. And each ballot has a unique barcode, so we know the ballot inside pertains to a particular voter. So you can't flood, our offices with fake ballots either, or fake envelopes either. And when I say sign the back of the envelope, before even counting ballots, the first thing county officials do is check the signature on the envelope with the signature on file for that voter as part of confirming that that ballot indeed came back from the voter. But we even go the extra mile. If the signatures don't match or somebody forgot to sign the envelope, county officials will contact that voter to allow them to correct whatever issue is, because we want their vote to be counted. But if the voter says that wasn't me, then maybe we have to look into it or investigate. So a lot more precautions taken than that. Again, the truth is voter fraud is exceedingly rare, but too often it's used as a pretext to change the rules to make it harder for eligible people to register and to vote. So, in California, we're going to show a better way.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask I think we have time for one more question. I know that your time is limited, and we really appreciate you being here with us. So if nonprofits were to serve as polling locations, are there particular protections for them as organizations around liability concerns? What are some of the conditions that are going to be in place to ensure safety for everyone, including the nonprofit?
Right. So I'll mention a couple of things because there's the legal concern and health concern during COVID, and then I'll let Ryan sort of add more color when he presents. But for starters, from a legal standpoint, yes, there's a formal agreement between the voting location host, if you will, and the county. And part of the protocols we're building in this year is ensuring that we're sort of sanitizing on the way in, sanitizing during the course of voting, and sanitizing on the way out, hoping to leave the venue even better than how we found it. One of the concerns a lot of nonprofit organizations have is, oh no, we can't be affiliated with any political activity, right? Voting is not a political partisan activity. It's our democracy at work. And I think you should be even more comfortable knowing that state law prohibits any electioneering in the vicinity of a voting location. So, as a nonprofit, you can't be involved with it. And if you host a voting location, you now have state election law protecting you from having that campaigning or electioneering anywhere near that voting location. So you have a security blanket on top of that, if you will. So just a couple good things to keep in mind. And like I said, I'll let Ryan go into it any further. One last thing I'll mention on the poll worker recruitment front. Every county offers stipends. It's different in each county for poll workers. So we know there's a lot of people out there who are either unemployed or underemployed. This may be an opportunity to earn a few extra dollars at a tough time, including teenagers. We have a pretty robust student poll worker program. So if you're 18 or older, you're an adult, it's up to you. If you're 16 or 17 years old, with the permission of your school and your parents, you can sign up to be a student poll worker. And in most counties, bilingual poll workers earn a little bit extra.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for taking those questions and for giving us that information. And we really appreciate you taking the time today. And we look forward, Cal Nonprofits, and I know other nonprofits participating in this webinar, look forward to partnering with your office and also with their local registrars. So
thank you so much, and please continue to stay safe.
Yes, you too. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I am going to turn it over now to Karina, who's going to introduce our wonderful panelists.
All right, so thanks, Lucy. It is my pleasure to introduce our following panelists. And this section of our webinar will be hearing from their expertise and sort of their experience on the ground with elections work and civic engagement. And we have Ryan Ronko from Placer County. He's the Registrar of Voters there. We also have two Cal Nonprofits members, amazing organizations doing work on the ground. We have El Concilio, and from El Concilio we have the CEO and President, Jose Rodriguez. And we have Dr. Ines Ruiz Houston, who is the Vice President of Special Programs and Operations. And also from El Concilio, we have Jose Dominguez, who is the Vice President of Program Development. Last but not least, we also have Ashley McCumber, the CEO of San Francisco Meals on Wheels. And I'll turn it over to you, Lucy.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome panelists. We're really excited to hear from you all. We are going to start with Ryan. So Ryan, would you just give a little bit of information about what the role of the registrar is? I think that would really be useful for folks. And then also how you're partnering with local nonprofits to help ensure fair elections. Love to hear from you about that.
Excellent. Absolutely. Thank you, Lucy, Karina. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And thank you all that are on this webinar for what you do in our communities. We really do appreciate all the hard work that you're doing for us. A local registrar, I like to equate it as like an extreme party planner. In my case, I get to throw a party every few months for 250,000 of my closest friends and neighbors. We have a guest list. We send out invitations. We have RSVPs, like the people that sign up as permanent vote by mail voters. We have people that crash the party, people that are conditional voter registrants or same day registrants, of course. And I get to recruit a lot of my loyal friends to help us be able to put on this big giant party. And in that example, you guys all on this call are my loyal friends. We rely on the help of our nonprofits to provide poll workers, as the secretary said, to provide polling place locations in many instances, and help us to get the word out about the upcoming election. So more specifically to that, I would say, Lucy, the local registrar is responsible for most of the work of the elections administration, a lot of the boots on the ground work that we need to do to conduct an election in California. We're the agency that issues and accepts candidate filing paperwork. We create and print the official ballots and the local voter information guides to help voters understand the upcoming election. We recruit and train the poll workers who help us at the vote centers. We locate and survey all of the locations that we need to make sure that they're safe and usable and accessible for voters. And we distribute voter registration cards and other materials so that the public is ready so that they can ensure that they know what they're going to do on election day. And to get to the second question, the way that we partner with local nonprofits, we do that in several different ways. First, I'm going to start with an example that's probably a little bit less obvious. For over 30 years in Placer County, our local American Association of University Women branches, they've been responsible for distributing paper voter registration cards and voting rights information and poll worker recruitment forms to 88 locations in Placer County. For a county like mine, which stretches from the rim of Lake Tahoe all the way down to the farms in Sheridan, California, there's no way for my staff to be able to monitor and restock all of those locations up and down the vast county of Placer, which takes about 3 hours to travel from stem to stern. So the AAUW's help with this process is invaluable to us. It really fits in nicely with their platform of advocacy and education and philanthropy. And I couldn't think of a better way to vote with your mission than to be able to do something like that. A more obvious example might be our partnership with local nonprofits with our speaker series. At election time, the local registrar of voters is in high demand for speaking engagements, and all sorts of organizations want to have us talk about the upcoming election. This is an important role for us, and it gives us an opportunity to be able to get the word out about the changes for an upcoming election, reminders about deadlines, or just simply encouraging people to register and get participating in that election. Some nonprofits feel like they're bothering us by reaching out to us and asking us to speak to their organizations, but in truth, it's an important, for any nonprofit, even ones with no nexus to a governmental function, to have their members educated about the upcoming election. So if you wish to vote with your mission and you want to reach out to your local elections official and invite the registrar to speak to your group, just know that we want to do that with you. So please reach out. And finally, the secretary mentioned this, and so I want to mention it as well. We love to partner with our local nonprofits to both host and staff polling place locations In a traditional polling place election in Placer County, we need about 230 polling places in my county to conduct an election. That's an incredibly difficult task to find 230 suitable locations and recruit over 1,200 people to be able to work those polling places. So we reach out to our local nonprofits to consider hosting and staffing a local polling place. For hosting, those nonprofits that have a physical location are paid a fee for making those locations available for us for the day and for this upcoming election for many days. And as the Secretary said, we're going to make sure that it's sanitized and protected so that we leave it better than we found it. For staffing, nonprofits are responsible for recruiting their members to work the polls for the election. Instead of paying the poll worker that stipend, what we do is we turn that over to the nonprofit so that it's a donation to the nonprofit rather than to the worker. In Placer County, if a nonprofit sends all of their members to training and they fully staff a polling place, it's $900 that's earned by the club to work for that day. For many of our local nonprofits, that's their largest fundraiser of the year. And in March, we had 20% of our polling places that were fully staffed by nonprofit organizations. They collectively earned over $25,000 for their agencies. But the best part of that, Lucy, is that that money almost always stays local. So it goes to fund your missions, be that college scholarships or promoting literacy or ending human trafficking or civic engagement. And it's a true win-win for us because our nonprofits and for the community, because we get to support our nonprofits with the funds that they need to survive and thrive. They get to do work in our community that uplifts and empowers our community, and the uplifted community then gets more engaged and it results in higher voter turnout for me. So it's a win-win-win, really. So I hope you do indeed vote with your mission. Wonderful. As this webinar is trying to promote. And you use one or more of these examples to be able to get engaged with this election and with your local registrar of voters. So thank you, Lucy.
Well, thank you so much. That's great information, both all the examples and also just your information about what registrars do. And we are going to hopefully have some time for questions of all of the panelists at the end. And we want to make sure that all of the panelists have a chance. So we're going to keep going with hearing from our panelists, and then we will take some questions for all of them at the very end. So thank you again, Ryan. And I'm going to turn it over to Karina.
Thanks, Ryan, again. So these next questions are for Ines and Jose Dominguez from El Concilio of Stockton. We want to hear from you. You know, Ryan just let us know how he's partnering with nonprofits, right, in his county. How have you partnered with your local elections office to get out the vote?
Well, thank you for inviting us. El Concilio is really excited. We love the partnership, and just like Ryan said, we do believe in partying. And the party that the registrar provides is really a celebration of our democracy and our citizenship. So we with El Concilio are super honored to be part of this process. One of the things that we've been in partnership for over 15 years or more with the registrars of voters. They are kind of our friends. And let me tell you, we do make a lot of calls. Questioning about the application or questioning about how many applications can we get. It is truly a partnership. And I encourage all of us to get that person first name basis. So early in January, I became best of friends with Virginia in the San Joaquin County Office of Voter Registrars. And then now it's Jessica. So I have first name basis. So as a nonprofit, get to know your person on a first name basis. And they will tell you, hey, by the way, we have a workshop coming up. Invite the community. Oh, you got a free event. And then when we go to those events, you encourage your community to get excited, whether your staff or others, and say, hey, bring your family. It is really an opportunity to celebrate and to learn more about how to help others get registered to vote. And not only that, El Concilio has also partnered as a polling place. So our Manteca office this year was a polling location. Getting the training and learning about the information. Not only that, but our communities don't know how to vote. So we've been getting a lot of questions like, okay, now I'm registered to vote, but how? Like, how do I do this process? So by having a place where we can do what's called a mock trial of how to fill in the bubbles and what color pens you must have to color in those bubbles, how to mail it in. Some people's like, I didn't even know how to do it. So having a mock polling site so people can practice on how to, because just even that alone can be very intimidating for a lot of us. So this is where we come together and helping one another, sharing information with one another. And then also when it comes to registering people to vote, our registrar office, we call them, it's like, hey, can we have a, because some of us are old fashioned, want the old fashioned format. But at the same time, we grab a stack. They actually will check out as a nonprofit the numbers that you get, so you can keep track through your agency how many are being turned in. So they don't have to do it on site, but they can turn it in on their own. But now also having this electronic process, there's also a great way to go through it, and your nonprofit can be identified in the sections like, does somebody help you with your voter registration? And they can fill it out, put the name of your nonprofit, and then your staff members that actually help do it, or family and friends. So we are really excited about that.
It's great to hear about the partnerships that you've been able to build and the awesome work that y'all are doing with your local elections office. I have another question. So how are you integrating voter engagement and education into the programs that you already provide? And especially with COVID, how are you adapting those strategies?
Yeah, so every year in February, Concilio has an all-staff meeting, and we really stress the importance of voting and educate all of our employees that voting is important, and especially this year in 2020, where there's a president election. And we remind them of the importance that we need to get the vote out and register people to vote. We help our customers register to vote. We have employees carry register voter registration ballots with them when they do visits, whether they're doing home visits or the customers coming into the office to meet with them, and they have the voter registration ballots with them. And they ask them, are you registered to vote? And if they say no, the employee will hand them the voter registration ballot there at the office. And you know, we do this in Stanislaus County and San Joaquin County, and with over 250 employees. And one of the ways that we really promote this with our agency is we reward our employees. If they get 5 people registered to vote, then they are entered into a drawing. And every week they can get from a gift card of $25. And this year we're doing a grand prize of $1,000 for the employee that registered the most of the whole organization. So we're really pushing people to register to vote. Is important, in particular this year. And then the other question you had was, how do we are pivoting or our strategy changing due to COVID-19? And basically one of the things we did is we created a link to become a voter on a website, and where everyone that visits our website can go into the link and they can register to vote. And that link will take them to the California voter registration, and they can register to vote online. And we're just, another thing that we're doing is we're mixed messaging, and we're incorporating voter registration with the Census 2020, because also this year census is the US Census, and everyone needs to complete the census. And we're also incorporating it with COVID-19 messaging. So we're integrating messaging and sharing that information on Facebook Live. Our YouTube, Concilio has the YouTube channel, which we also do online meetings to our community, and we just share the information through that platform.
Great. It's great to hear how staff is being motivated. You know, they're sort of getting incentives to already include voter registration in the work that they're already doing. That's awesome. So Jose Rodriguez, I'd like to hear from you. As the CEO of El Concilio, how are you integrating voter engagement and education work already into the organization's mission and culture?
You need to unmute. You need to unmute, Jose.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me be part of this panel. I'm really excited to be able to share some of the work that we're doing. I was saying that this starts, first of all, with our board of directors, so they understand the importance of the work that we do. Our mission as an organization is to improve the quality of life of the residents of the Central Valley. And our board understands that that starts with education. You know, there's that expression that you give a person a fish, you feed them for a day, but if you teach them to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. Our board understands that part of the education that we need to do is to have people understand the democratic process and the civic engagement process, and how that people can become their own #1 advocates. Because all the services that we provide are dependent on government funding or private donations, and who can be the best advocate but the people that we serve directly. So by teaching them how the process works and inviting them to share their stories and letting them know about the different processes, the different initiatives that are on the ballot that impact their lives, we get their buy-in and their engagement. And so even if they're not citizens of the United States, there's still a way for them to participate, because they can encourage their family members, their kids who may be citizens, that they can register to vote. So there's always a way, we always try to find a way to anybody that we touch to make sure that they understand the importance of the process and how they can get involved, even if they can't directly vote themselves, but they certainly can be an advocate to encourage those in their families to vote. So, you know, it's really widespread within the organization. We've talked a little bit about the competition that we have with the staff. You know, within the different programs, we have competitions, which program can register the most voters. We do a pizza party. You know, it's all in good fun, but it's really about also making sure that we register people to vote. Every year, when there's an election, we set a goal for our organization about how many people we can register to vote. And then we ask everybody to pitch in. So as Jose mentioned, we have over 200 employees. So we ask each employee, you can register at least 10 people, and we're going to register 2,500 new voters. And so that's the way that we do it. We ask everybody to do their little piece. Certainly we can't expect one person to register 2,500, but we can expect, you know, one person to do 10. And when you add it cumulatively, it can be quite a large number.
Great. Well, thank you, Jose. I'm going to jump in here, and I'd like to thank you to the three of you from El Concilio. Really appreciate your information. So I would like now to go to Ashley McCumber from Meals on Wheels. And Ashley, how do you integrate voter engagement and education into the services that you provide day to day, especially with COVID?
Thank you, Lucy. It's an honor to be on this panel today, and an honor to be here to talk about this extremely important topic. Before I answer your question, I just want to do a quick shout out to Cal Nonprofits for really stepping up to the plate to raise the voice of nonprofits in California, not just during election cycles, but on a daily basis. We sometimes are not asked our opinion on very important things that are happening in Sacramento, and there are very important things happening every day. And Cal Nonprofits is really our champion. So for the 247 participants, if you're not a member of this organization, please do join, because we need to lift our voices together. At Meals on Wheels San Francisco, I think people know what we do. It's kind of in our name. But we are providing nutrition, safety checks, and supportive services to about 5,000 unduplicated people in a year on a normal year. In a normal year. But obviously, we're doing a lot more than that right now. Many people who were accessing services out in the community are now also homebound, so we're part of that system that makes that happen. About 85% of the people we touch are seniors, and about 15% are adults with disabilities. And most recently, we are now ensuring that anyone who's in their home right now, quarantined because of a positive diagnosis in a household, are getting either groceries or meals during that quarantine period. We like to say at Meals on Wheels that we nourish the whole person. So it isn't just about providing food, but it's about acknowledging the dignity and the voice of all people at all times. And so this topic, this idea of vote with your mission, is nothing new to us, and we've been engaged with it for a while. If you can see the little blue and yellow sign behind my head, a couple of years ago, we actually engaged in putting something on the ballot in San Francisco to double the amount of money spent on seniors and people with disability. And that was a really good effort to say, hey, we as a collective can do that work and make sure that we're meeting this wave of need that's out there. So right now, what we're focused in on really is two things. We understand that we need to be counted and we need to vote. And so simultaneously, we're running Your Voice Counts campaign. We are lucky in the sense that we don't have to pay for a stamp. We can actually touch people on an ongoing basis, and we can be in the home. So we try to make sure to give people the right information in the right language and the right time frame as it relates to flyers. We can do that instantaneously, and you see on your screen an example of that. We've reinforced that with newsletters. We also have 13 social workers who are now doing a lot of work by phone. And part of that work is answering people's questions about voting and any questions, and making sure that they know that. So obviously, in a normal year, most of our clients would be vote by mail or absentee ballot folks. This year in particular, and we're lucky that a ballot's going to be mailed to people regardless of whether or not they ask for one, but we need to make sure that they're A, registered, and B, that their address is correct. And so that's the type of work that we're doing right now. And we're just making sure a lot of our clients have challenges with not having access to the web or some issues with phone interaction, and we're there to assist them in that way. And that's what our social work team has done. And obviously, we're trying to engage our workforce, engage our broader community of volunteers, our board, et cetera, with the idea that we count and that we need to make sure that everyone else counts. So with the notion in mind of leaving some time for questions, I'll kind of stop there, but that's really what we're doing to make sure that people and our seniors count.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashley. Well, this is great. We do have some time for some questions, and we have quite a few questions. So I'm just going to open it up to all of you as panelists, and then, whoever would like to jump in with an answer, we can have multiple answers too. So you bring rich and different perspectives to this work. So we have a question about reaching young people in your communities. How can nonprofits help reach young people in their communities, because their vote is very important and they can talk to their peers as well? So would love to hear your strategies for that. Ryan, it looks like Ryan and Jose, maybe both of you are. Sure. Why don't you start, Ryan, and we'll go to Jose.
Absolutely. I would encourage you, if you have that passion, to reach out to your local registrar. I know that many counties, including Placer, have a very robust program to go into the schools when there's no COVID, of course, but go into the schools and present a program that talks about the importance of your participation as a new voter. And we try to reach these students early. We want to be able to, we have a mandate to have to provide outreach. But what better place but to put that money into a young voter and encourage them and let them know how important their participation is. And a lot of times they have questions about how to participate. So we get to be able to tell them about expecting a ballot if you're a vote by mail voter, what the voter information guide looks like, and all that. So I would say that if many counties that don't have programs because they don't have the resources to be able to provide that. If you can saddle up next to a county and provide some resources, that might be the difference, being able to provide a program like that. So I'd encourage you to do that. Reach out to your registrar.
Right. And the easiest way to do that is just to get online and look for.
Yeah, it should be easy for you to search up your elections office or registrar of voters in your county. And we're all very, very accessible. We may be elected, some of us, we may be appointed, some of us, but we're all just trying to administer this process. So I would just search up elections office in your county name, and you'll be able to find who that person is.
Wonderful, thank you. Jose, did you want to respond to the question of reaching young people?
Well, what I'd rather do is let Dr. Houston answer, because she's come up with some really creative ways to reach out to our superintendent and the local high schools for some competitions. So take it away.
Hi. Yeah, well, one of the things is you got to get young people involved and work with some of the clubs and organizations, whether at the high school or collegiate level. So we can work with the college campuses to create a prize. One of the things is movement and social activity, because we know if a young person registers a lot of people, you can also entice young people by a prize of an opportunity to go to the state capitol and talk with legislators. That entices them. Also, we were talking about for each of the high schools, the the students that register, they can have a family pizza night for registering the most amount of young people at the high school level. But at the collegiate level, our college students are really wanting to be involved. And a lot of them want to go into our field of nonprofits or working with each other. So this is a great way to create movement. So that's where we're getting the young people. It's like, what would be an incentive? And a lot of our young people, right now, cost of books are extremely expensive, or, some type of subsidy, but check with those local college campuses that you have. We're talking about a possibility of a challenge, since we're serving San Joaquin County as Stanislaus County, a challenge between Modesto Community College and San Joaquin Delta College through El Concilio, and encouraging them to reach out to families and friends and register them. And then we will have a couple of opportunities for winning one, whoever gets the most registered people, and they have to show us via affidavit numbers, right, of who they registered to show proof, because you can't just say I just registered. But then at the same time, those at least did 5 could be in a pot, and we can do a drawing or something and give them some type of gift card for Amazon or something, because we know books are expensive, or supplies for school. So these are some of the intense opportunities and challenges that we like to do within groups. And then we were talking about some of the particular clubs and organizations. Faculty members or some of our high school teachers can be one of your great allies and partners to get our young high school students involved too.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to keep going with questions. We've got quite a few. Ashley, this might be one for you, but others as well. So how can we as nonprofits who are involved in many things and serving so many people take on some of the voter education activities, but not stretch ourselves too thin?
Well, I think that's always kind of the challenge within the nonprofit community, particularly in times when we're really stretching to reach basic safety net needs, to kind of step outside of that. But I do think that part of what we need to acknowledge is, in order to do that work, we have to lift our voice. And this is one area where I would say it really matters to at least do the baseline, to make sure that your staff knows how to register to vote, that your volunteers, that your constituents know how to register to vote, and they have the basic information they need to cut through the clutter, that this is how it works, this is the date you need to do it by, and by the way, here are assets and resources that can assist you in doing that work. So I understand the question that, hey, we're just overburdened, we can't take on another project. I would just encourage people to understand the messaging that's coming out of Cal Nonprofits. This is not adjacent, it's very core to who we are as a sector, is to raise our voice for people we represent. And I would encourage you to actually ingrain it in who you are. This is what we do. Sometimes we may have some barriers to doing all of it, but we always need to be doing some of it.
Thank you. We've talked about polling locations, we've talked about mail-in voting, but we haven't talked about drop boxes. Can we talk about drop boxes for a minute? Is there a role for nonprofits to play in providing drop boxes, and what are the advantages of drop boxes? So whoever wants to jump in. We've got a short answer because we're about out of time.
Drop boxes are a key component of the upcoming election. We're going to obviously have more vote by mail ballots out there. So many counties are actually trying to find more drop box locations. If you have a place where a drop box can be staffed or even unstaffed, because there are 2 different types of drop boxes, I would certainly, again, reach out to your local registrar and say that you have a wish to be able to maybe provide that service. And we can talk about that with you because all counties have a different, unique situation there.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to answer that real quickly?
I believe that it's also about our trusted resources and our community partners. A lot of our families are very culturally sensitive or do not feel comfortable, but a lot of the services we provide, we've created a trust factor, and therefore they feel that they can trust and validate, and they have trust because they do other documents or services that we may provide. So therefore there's already, oh, I know it's in good hands because I've done other services or projects with all of you. So yeah, something, and also culturally understanding too, how our communities have multiple languages. Some of our services serve multiple languages so people can have further questions.
Great, so providing a safe place that people really trust to drop off their ballot. Wonderful. Well, we are out of time, and this has been an amazing collection of information and resource for people. So I want to thank our speakers so much, all of you. And I also want to thank our technical support team, Christina Dragonetti and Christine Metropolis. And I also want to remind you again, I know that Christina's been posting in our chat box, but we have a great webinar coming up that's going to dig in deeper on the legal do's and don'ts for nonprofits around elections. We'd love to have you join us on August 27th for that. And thank you, Ashley, for the plug about membership. I want to just say again, if you would like to join Cal Nonprofits and you have not, you have the opportunity to join with a 20% discount. So you just use your COVID-19 discount and you can join Cal Nonprofits and engage with us in future advocacy. So again, I want to thank everybody for today's webinar, and let's go out there and support a fair election. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.